welcome to another episode of Away and Abroad. Today I'm going to be sharing about my trip to Mexico City that I went on last month, February to March, just for 7 days. And yeah, I just thought I'd share some highs and lows. I won't go through step by step of like every place I went to, but just a few takeaways from the trip. First of all, I want to start off with what helped with the planning of the trip, and that is a app called Notion that my friend Olivia sent me her itinerary to Mexico City, and I replicated that and changed it to suit the activities I was going to do, and it just translates so well from desktop to phone, which is a game changer because I used to plan my trips either on Google Calendar and just kind of map things out that way, or I would do it in an Excel spreadsheet, which was great for the desktop, but looking at it on the phone was just a nightmare because everything was so zoomed out and it was just really hard to navigate and click on links and everything. But Notion is fantastic. It can kind of nest maps, links. There's even a page for like your budget where you can add up all of your expenses. And so everything is just so much more well organized. You can even put little emojis to put with your titles for the activities. So I just enjoyed it so much more. And it was really easy to like move things around to as I pivoted and readjusted the schedule as I went. So add that to your list of planning documents if you're on the lookout. It was a game changer. Okay, so I'll just start with some highs of the trip, which was, I think, as I was making this list, it was mostly highs. There was really nothing wrong with the trip. I had a great time, and all the museums I went to were probably the highlight. And honestly, practicing my Spanish in real life was really cool too, and very satisfying. It wasn't perfect, and I definitely stumbled through some interactions, but I felt like I could get through enough, especially things like just eating at a restaurant. It's like, yeah, you don't need to know a lot of words, but it was just really satisfying when they asked, like, do you want coffee or juice? Like, I know what those words are. Or if do you need a bag when you check out at a store? You know, just like all those little things that I didn't know. Like last time I was in Mexico, I went to Oaxaca 2 years ago, and I can tell it made a huge difference, all my studying and learning. So that was just so satisfying to feel the difference. And also seeing words everywhere, like puerta for door 4 or whatever, you know, at the airport. You just like, I think the language just gets in there because you're seeing it everywhere. Like that's just the norm. But yeah, even people helping me like put money on my card for the metro, or like I was able to communicate that well enough. And like, people were just so helpful as well. And I never assumed if people knew English. Not everyone did. So I was really happy that I could kind of, you know, meet somewhere in the middle and get through it. So huge win for me personally. So yeah, generally I really loved the architecture. I stayed in Roma Norte, which is like very gentrified, which I'll get into more later. That was kind of a low, but I felt very safe, which is nice. Of course, I'm not going to take that for granted. Roma Norte is a neighborhood that's like very inspired by a lot of different architecture types from France and I think Spain and lots of different places, and you can really see that. So that was super interesting to experience, and it's going through kind of like what a lot of cities go through, New York especially, but where like new things are coming in and either they're taking over these historical structures and, you know, making them nicer, or tearing them down and replacing them with other buildings. But I went on a historical walking tour there, and that was really cool. And so what they said there too was that Roma Norte has always been a more high-end area, and now it's just becoming more so. Like it's the place to be. Like it feels very sceney. It feels a little bit like Soho in New York. There's just so many brands there, like Golden Goose and, you know, other high-end shopping, a lot of Michelin star restaurants, a lot of great eating that's other ethnic foods like Vietnamese or Chinese. I had ramen one night, as well as Mexican food too. So you really do get a lot of different flavors there, and I think it's becoming kind of a destination in terms of that, where you can go and kind of get like a universal city experience in Mexico, So I guess that's my pro and con. Like if that's what you're looking for, it's cool. But it's like kind of, I would say, less on the authentic side of like actual living in Mexico. But I mean, people live there, so it's authentic. So it's just going through changes. So that's what I would say about that. Another neighborhood that I hung out in and actually got my tattoo there was called Polanco, and that had like an Hermes, Zara, like really high end. So I wouldn't even say that was as high end as Roma Norte, but maybe they're kind of similar. That was really interesting to see, and like all the architecture there was really beautiful, but a lot of gated areas too. I'll probably share a photo maybe on my Instagram or Substack down the road, but I got 2 monarch butterfly tattoos on my right shoulder. And at first I thought they were going to go on my arm with my koi fish that I got in Vietnam. I decided once we put the stencils on, 2 large ones and then 2 small ones, like kind of lower on my arm. And it's just like so interesting that like once you see it on your body, it's like you kind of feel when it's right. And I'm just like, oh yeah, like this is it. And so it was just kind of expected, because I didn't think I think I had my shoulder in mind, but I was kind of flexible on like where or how big and stuff. So yeah, that was cool to experience, because I think with my fish, I just was sort of like, I didn't really know what to expect, and I still like them obviously, but I didn't really feel one way or the other of like, oh, this feels like right. And now like this felt super right. So it's hard to explain, but I'm really happy I had both of them. And it's just super fun to like create a memory in a place that I went. So let's see. My favorite museums I went to, I realized I went to quite a few of them, and that was all fantastic, like so inspiring. My favorite one was probably Frida Kahlo. And if you don't know, and if you're planning on going to Mexico City, you need to book these tickets in advance, probably like 3 weeks minimum. I think I booked mine like 5 or so weeks out. So I'm really glad I got that tip from who knows where. But yeah, so happy I got to go there. It doesn't take a ton of time to get through it, but just the colors of the house are so beautiful, and the garden and windows were really cool to see. And then they had her paints and stuff laying out where she would paint and stuff in this like sun-filled studio. It was just gorgeous. So, and then there was a quote by Patti Smith written on the wall, and it was like about the butterflies that Frida had received from somebody, and they were pinned above her bed because she was really bedridden for a long time. And so I felt like that was confirmation to get my butterfly tattoo as well. And yeah, it kind of occurred to me as I was going through the museum that it's really kind of remarkable that for someone as disabled as Frida was, to be as famous as she was really kind of remarkable. And it's interesting to think about those factors that probably played into her being famous. Her dad was a photographer, and so he took pictures of her, doing her art. And so they have that sort of documentation. And then her husband, Diego Rivera, was also famous, and it's hard to say like who's even more famous. I think he was maybe more famous at that time, and then she became famous, and it's like, was it because of him, or so that's super interesting to think about, just because I personally am not as aware of many people who have disabilities who are also at that level of notoriety and fame. And not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's just something I thought of. And like kind of what takes someone to be famous, especially for like a whole country. Like she's definitely just so well known. Like if you go to Mexico, you'll see pictures of her everywhere. Maybe even more than Diego. but Diego was friends with, I can't remember which Rockefeller, but he did a mural, I think, in Rockefeller Center. So again, they both were prolific in their own way. So that was just interesting to ponder as I was going through the museum, but definitely worth checking out. And in addition to the museum, going around the neighborhood felt like a lot more authentic too, to like an authentic like Mexican city. It felt nice to kind of step away from the scene, quote unquote, of Roma Norte. So that was nice. And then I went to this little cafe nearby, and that's probably where I had to rely on most of my Spanish. It was sweet because both of us were like, oh, my Spanish is so bad. And he's like, my English is so bad. And we're like, no, it's fine. But it was sweet because I was reading my book and on the sidewalk, and then this older man came by with his dog, Clementina. and he saw my camera sitting on the table, and he's like, oh, can I take your picture of you reading? I was like, sure. Like at first I just worried a little bit that he would like take my camera, but he took a picture of me, and I didn't see him focus it at all. So I was just like, we'll see if this turns out. And it's a little blurry, but it's fine. And then I wish I would have taken his picture, but I knew I was like nearing the end of the roll, so I wasn't sure if that was like the very last picture or not. So, but he was really sweet, and we talked about cameras, and yeah, so that was fun. Heading back was might have been a low, just because the bus, this was my like little love-hate experience with the transit. I loved the train, super great, super consistent, very easy to get on and off and everything. But the buses, I feel like many cities have buses in common where they're just not the best or most reliable. And not only that, but like, I don't know what I would do without Google Maps. Like, I feel so spoiled. But sometimes I would wait on a corner, and I'm like, well, this is just where the bus stops. It says it's here, but there's no indication that the bus actually comes there or which one. And then the bus would come, and I'm like, is that it? Like, I couldn't even really tell. Sometimes they just weren't clearly marked. And I like a couple times I definitely got on buses that I was just like, fingers crossed, I hope it's the one. And also I didn't know like how much each one costs. Like, they kind of cost different, I think. I still don't really know. Every time I put on like 10 pesos, like 5 to 10, because it really didn't cost me that much. But some I think were like 6. And I'm like, well, if I put 10, like that'll cover it, And they probably could just tell that I'm like not from there. And they're probably like, she probably doesn't even speak Spanish, so we won't even bother. So at least there was an attempt for payment. It may not have been the correct amount, but I tried. Also, the other thing I didn't realize was that, how a lot of buses have like the string that you pull or buttons throughout the bus? There was one button at the back of the bus. So like the bus would stop, but people were like only getting off the back, of course. And I was like, but how are they telling the bus driver when to stop? Like, I couldn't even tell, because like they were usually full or fullish. And finally I realized what was happening, of like how to get off the bus. For the most part, it worked out that I would just get off with someone else. But yeah, didn't know how to exit until halfway through the trip. So you fake it till you make it. Okay, other museums I really liked: the Museo de Arte Moderno and Museo Tamayo Arte Contemporaneo. Both were near the Chapultepec Castle, and so I went to both of them after I went to the castle, and I really loved them. I loved the inside. I loved the art. The contemporary one was probably, I don't know. I liked both of them because The Modern Art Museum had a really cool sculpture garden, and I really enjoyed that. I took some time to like sketch and stuff, and that was really great. To be honest, I think I could have skipped the castle just because it's kind of a trek to get up there. It's like a 20-minute walk and then up and down. And I only say that because a lot of the writing was in Spanish, and I just wasn't very familiar with the history. So I think if I had known a little bit more, it would have kind of connected more dots for me. And the castle was cool, and it had a great lookout of the city. So that's what I'll say. Like, it was worth it for those reasons. But I think in hindsight, I was like, I might have been able to skip that one. Plus, I think it was Saturday, and there's just like more people around, but definitely a good experience. Another place I would put high on your list, especially if you like to write letters, is Palacio Postal. It's a working post office. The inside reminded me a little bit of like the Titanic for some reason, like the grand staircase and stuff. And you can buy postcards and write and send them. So I wrote to 3 people, and I have yet to hear back if they've received them. And it's been like a month, but it's always so fun to do that. So yeah, I think those were my highlights and things I would like strongly recommend or caution or whatever if you're planning a trip to Mexico City. I kind of felt like I would have been satisfied with just going for 5 days. I could have seen and spent a little bit more time in the Centro neighborhood. There's a few things I didn't quite get to, but it was just like really hot that day, and towards the end of the trip, I realized I get more and more fatigued and just kind of like tired. And so I think what I was meant to see, I saw. Like, when I look at my itinerary, I planned the things that were like most important to me at the front end of the trip. And so I think towards the end, I was just like, well, if I see things, I see them. If not, I feel satisfied with what I got to see. But yeah, my Airbnb was really nice. It was in, I guess they call them single family homes, but also the single family meaning like there could be multiple families living in this space. So it was like a winding staircase with kind of a courtyard in the middle, and then like a rooftop on one side. So mine was like 3 flights up, which thankfully they helped me carry my bag up because I was like, oh, I didn't realize it was a climb. But that was so nice. And like towards the end of the trip, when I was getting kind of tired, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to enjoy like sitting in the sun and just being warm, because it was in February and that's just what I needed. And the whole reason why I planned the trip was just to go somewhere warm in the middle of winter. And that was fantastic. And it's nice to enjoy like the money I spent on the actual Airbnb, because sometimes you spend the whole day out and you're like, I didn't even really stay here. So that was great. Okay, so the lows, yeah, honestly, I just like don't even know. I think maybe the low was kind of like a filter that was kind of put on towards the beginning of the trip, where again, the gentrification, I was just like, oh, I felt like I needed to work hard to find like an authentic experience. And it made me feel a tiny bit jaded with like other people who were there, because I'm just like, oh, are we all just like going to the same coffee shop to get like lattes, like the same thing we could be doing at home, or in a place like Brooklyn or something. And so I was a little bummed to realize that and to see, just because I know the gentrification has made housing difficult and less affordable for locals, which is how it works, which is the consequence of it. So it made me feel a little conflicted about that. And long term, I am interested in living in another country someday. Maybe it's just for a year or whatever. And so Mexico City was kind of on the radar, but I think I just wouldn't feel comfortable doing that or being like another person, taking advantage of the cheap rent when other people have a hard time making a life there. And again, like it's a personal decision. I think there's nothing wrong with it if you choose to like learn the language and like assimilate to some degree, especially if you're the one taking advantage of the amenities, for lack of a better word, and not as like a refugee. Maybe that's a double standard, but I think I have more compassion for people who like aren't able to assimilate as much or speak the language as well if they're truly just like trying to survive in a place. But as a colonizer or, I mean, it is kind of colonizing. So, as a colonizer, I think you should do your best to give back locally and understand the language and like do your part in those things. I think it is a form of respect. And yeah, so that's what I'll say about that. And then I guess it was so much on my mind because, in America, we've had a lot of issues with ICE, and then especially targeting like Mexican communities here. And so some people are able to see this as isolated instances. Like, yes, Americans, we are fighting a battle in our own ways of having an affordable life. And then they're also like Mexicans who live here have also been fighting their own battle of staying safe, staying in their houses, to be able to stay in this country. So the dichotomy of them escaping Mexico for a better life here and working so hard to be safe and keep their rights to live here, and then as Americans going to Mexico to have a better life there. It's ironic at best, and I don't know. I just feel I feel like I should have my thoughts better articulated about this, but I think it's just something to think about. Yeah, like you could definitely argue for both sides, both perspectives of like, how can we make where we live better for ourselves, and how can we make our life better for others, and how can we cause the least amount of harm and all of that. So those are just some, food for thought, truly, since I don't have much more to say than that. But just things that I was thinking about, especially with things that were happening in Minnesota around that time too. And I had planned this trip like months in advance, but yeah, so interesting timing of it all. Overall, I'm so happy I went. I had a fantastic time. And then creatively, I read a ton. I think I might have mentioned it on a previous episode that I read a book I picked up called No One Writes Back. And it was such a fun read because it was a story about a traveler, and the original language of the book was in Korean, and then it was translated to English, and then I bought it in Mexico City. So it was just like kind of a fun find. And then I sketched a lot and took like 2 or 3 rolls of film. I brought my medium format camera and my 35mm camera. And in my next trip, this kind of inspired me to work on double exposing my next roll, and I kind of wish I would have done it there, just because I was so drawn to like all these shadows of like plants and textures of the architecture and textures on the street and on the ground and in parks, and just so much foliage. And so I kind of wish that I had double exposed one roll and then taken like the next round there too. And if you're not familiar with what that means, double exposing is basically just taking one roll of film and you underexpose it both times, so that when it's developed, it's more or less has properly exposed frames, and it's basically an imprint of one picture on top of the other. And so I think with patterns and shapes and colors and all of that, it would be really cool to like have that as one background, and then like take pictures of like people, and or just having 2 different like shapes and colors or whatever. So if that all makes sense. But I think I'm going to do that on my next trip, which will be in June. I'm taking a trip to Portland, Oregon. And this, I feel sick of saying this, has been on the list for a long time, but it's true. Portland has just been like a city I've always heard about as being like quirky and hipster, but like in its own weird way. So I'm really excited. I booked my Airbnb for 2 days in the city, and then I'll be splitting time along the coast. So I haven't decided if I want to do like 2 days in one place and just drive around the area or go from like spot to spot. I don't love the idea of like picking up every day to, continue exploring, because it doesn't feel super relaxing. So TBD. Can't wait to give a report on that. I'm just so excited for all the film photography. Like that just, I'm just so excited for like the moody vibes, hopefully some fog. I can't wait for all that. So the tide pools, the like islands, formations out on the water. So yeah, let me know if you've been to Portland and if you have any like trip planning recommendations. I can't wait to go. I'm mostly excited to see Powell's Bookstore downtown and Stumptown Coffee, which I'm pretty sure originated in Portland. I know it originated on the West Coast, but pretty sure it's there. I went to Stumptown all the time in New York, so that's going to be fun to go and revisit in a different place. And yeah, I think it'll be like the perfect kind of road trip for me, because I don't like driving a ton, but I do love seeing multiple places and love the West Coast. I'm like kind of falling in love with it every trip I've taken. And subconsciously, it's been a place that I've been slowly chiseling away at over the past 2 years or so. 3 years ago, I think, was San Francisco, which I wanted to go back to this year, but like one place at a time. First San Francisco, then Seattle, San Diego in this past December, and now Portland. So I feel like I'm slowly crossing these places off the list. There's just so much to see out there, and it's nice being in the Midwest, so then the flights aren't that far to go back and forth as opposed to like the East Coast. So I'm kind of embracing like the location that I'm at right now to enjoy the proximity. Hopefully it's saving me money and definitely saving some time in adjusting to time zones and just getting there and back. So yeah, that is my update on Mexico City and where I'm going to next.